Hey, let's go ahead and get started. Let me open us with prayer before we dig in tonight. Father God, how grateful we are for your grace and your mercy and all the blessings you pour out upon us. Father, tonight I ask that you would bless our time together as we look to your city. We look to the city of Jerusalem. We'll consider some aspects of all that you have done there, and probably not tonight, but next time we gather together, consider what you will do there in the future. God, I ask that you bless this time, bless those who have come out to listen tonight and participate in open discussion and dialogue, Lord. God, I just even turn this slideshow over to you, as we know you are sovereign, you are in control. Father God, we love you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, some of y'all that were here earlier, I think it's even before Malia got here, I said I don't think there's as many embarrassing pictures of Malia in the slide deck. I know that may disappoint some of y'all, but I got to throw in some pictures of her from our excursions in the desert and Mount Carmel, where she found the only chair, I think, on the mountain in 5,000 years. And
that was awesome, by the way.
I turned around and there she's sitting in a chair. We're all sitting on like corners of rocks and jagged edges, and there she is sitting in a chair.
That was great.
I don't know how that happened, but because we weren't the first ones up there either.
Yeah.
God provided that chair for her.
She might have been the smartest one.
I'm just saying,
She may have been. You're right. So as I've talked about in Sunday morning, and then I think last Sunday I mentioned it too, and then in the Facebook page I mentioned it too. Last 2 times ago when we looked at Galilee, some of y'all said it wasn't too long. It was too long for me. I mean, I was exhausted, about to fall on my face when we were done. It was 2 hours going in Jerusalem and looking at the amount of pictures and things that there are to see and that we saw in Jerusalem. I thought there's no way to do that in one sitting, really. So we're gonna split up Jerusalem. I know it means one more night together, so y'all just have to, if you want to come back the next time, we'll do it again in 2 weeks to conclude it. Found a pretty good break point, which is really on when we went to lunch on the second day. So that is a pretty natural, nearly halfway break anyway, of where we went to lunch at the second day of the 3 days we spent in Jerusalem. The first picture on the slideshow has nothing to do with anything except I got to tell you the backstory. See the water on the ground right there below me? You can see that the stones are wet. So it was 100 degrees the whole time we were there. We got to Jerusalem, and it was supposed to be about 20 degrees cooler, and it was cooler that first evening and morning, but then the temperature was right back where it was every other day. But I was so busy, and we were so exhausted, and I spent a couple of hours at least every night working on the blog and all that stuff once we got back from a 12, 14-hour day and exhaustion. I had one morning I woke up a little bit early, the first morning in Jerusalem, and I thought, you know what, I actually have time and have the peace of mind to go out and sit on this little patio area outside our room and do a little Bible study myself. I didn't have time to do it the whole time we were there. We were so busy. I put on my ZCA hoodie, so I was representing Zion. Actually, I sent that picture to the softball team and the coaches and stuff at the school. Go out there, get ready to open up my Bible, and it was already a little bit wet out there, but then all of a sudden the sprinklers came on again. And one head was pointed right at me, right after that picture, and hit me right in the face. I'm like, all right, closed it up, went inside. So that's the kind of the reasoning behind that picture. But that was kind of, if you went right outside of our hotel room, we were on the back side of where we could see the old city. But we had our own little area to kind of go stand up. But we were too exhausted to really enjoy any of that very much. But that's what's going on there. So this is a place we would not have seen. Y'all may remember I told you, well, was it in Galilee when Rudy first had the kidney stones? We were praying for him and stuff. Well, it actually got so bad that they had to carry him to the hospital, carry him to the ER at a hospital in Jerusalem from his kidney stones. So we take this detour to go by the hospital and drop him off, and our Israeli guide went in with him to kind of make sure everything was taken care of and he was set up and all that stuff. So we drive by this place right here. It's right across from the hospital. What that is, that's a British cemetery. During World War I, when the Brits fought in Jerusalem, this land, actually they were in control of Jerusalem for quite a while. This land was given to them. I mean, we've got, y'all may or may not know, we've got cemeteries in Normandy and other places around the world that are American cemeteries. The same here, Israel gave this land to them for their own cemetery. It's a British cemetery right there. Of British soldiers that died in World War One. This is just kind of driving up to it. Like I said, this would not have been on the tour at all, except that Rudy had to go to the hospital. Well, I need to, there's a couple of these where you might hear some talking, so I need to turn this out. No, I didn't do that. I'll back up and plug this one again because I can't remember if. I guess Dan wasn't saying anything there about the cemetery. He'd already told us about it when we turned around the block. But that morning we prayed for Rudy, and we had a theme every day, and the theme here was puzzle pieces. And he gave every one of us a piece of a puzzle to carry with us all day long. And you'll see in further slides at the end of the day we put the puzzle together based on the pieces. He said usually there's a missing piece that somebody loses a piece or whatever, but we actually kept all of ours and we were able to put the puzzle back together. Some of these are just going to be cityscape pictures from different places as we drove through Jerusalem.
On the backbone, this is Simon Lord, the peak of the ridge. We're almost 3,000 feet high now. The mountains in the far distance in the clouds are, of course, the Hashemite kingdom, Amman, capital of Jordan.
You hear what he said there? Those mountains you can see in the distance in the clouds. That's Amman, Jordan. From Jerusalem, you can see Amman, Jordan on certain days.
What always amazes me here is that to the right, it's all green and fine.
That's when he's talking about on one side where it's Israel, everything's green and lush and God's, blessed. Then on the other side, you see this other country, it's brown and desolate and dirt. There's plenty of brown, desolate, dirt areas in Israel too. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying there. So this is probably a good time to mention something I saw in my notes here that I put down. Everything in Jerusalem has to be built out of limestone. That's why you see everything that white there. One other pretty cool thing some of y'all may know about limestone is even if you build something new with limestone, pretty quickly with weathering, it looks like it's old pretty quick just because of the way that the weathering happens to limestone. Also in Jerusalem, the British passed this. They passed the law about the limestone, and they've kept it for over 100 years now. But they also passed a law to restrict the height of any building in Jerusalem to 12 stories or less. That's why you don't see any skyscrapers in Jerusalem. That's why it still looks like it is an old ancient city. But to keep that look with everything new they build, it has to be made out of limestone, 12 stories or lower. That was our first. I think we saw it the night before driving in. No, maybe we didn't. We came in the other side, so we didn't see the Golden Dome until that next morning. Now, what you may or may not know, and what I think most people think, is that is not a mosque. Most people know that's Muslim, but it's not a mosque. It's not where they worship at. I'll show you a picture of the mosque. There is a mosque on the temple grounds, but that's not a mosque. And it looks massive, doesn't it? It is big, but I'm going to show you a picture in just a moment of comparing that to what the temple size was, and it's really no comparison to how big the temple was. So keep this picture in your mind of how big it is and how it dominates the landscape, because in a minute we're going to show you a picture of the size of the temple, Solomon's temple, based on that model size. This is the Church of All Nations, the Church of, there's another name for it. Do you remember what the other name for it was, Carol? Church of All Nations is the name that they use for the most part. And right to the side of it is Gethsemane. Gethsemane is right beside of that church. I won't show you any pictures of Gethsemane until 2 weeks from now, because the last day we spent in Jerusalem was made to be following the footsteps of Jesus as closely as we could the last week of his life. And that'll be 2 weeks from tonight. And we'll be in Gethsemane. The Mount of Olives is right up there too, kind of up and over to the side from there. Actually, that whole hillside is. Gethsemane's down near the bottom. But I'll show more pictures of that in 2 weeks, because as we were following the footsteps of Jesus last week on earth, we know a lot of time was spent in both those areas. Something else interesting about Muslims, I mean, they're in control. Something that's interesting in the Temple Mount area is
Get ready, friends. Everybody's gonna stop for us in a few minutes.
Dan was reminding us, there's another picture of those tombs you saw this morning if you were here at church. All those tombs from that cemetery right there on the same hillside. What Dan was telling us there is when we got to Jerusalem, it was a whole different experience than anywhere else we'd been for a lot of reasons, but another reason is there's people everywhere. And there's Muslims everywhere, and there's Jews everywhere, then there's these groups of Christians that are everywhere. So he's telling us, don't take anything except what you absolutely need to carry with you, your backpack with your water in it, basically, and stay together. Because it'd be easy to get separated there, and, you know, like in any city, it's a lot different if you get lost in a city trying to find somebody else versus if you get lost in a big open landscape. It's pretty easy to find somebody or yell for them. That's different when you're in Jerusalem. You've got to be paying attention to what's going on. Some other interesting things when I think about my notes I took on Muslims and kind of the history of Muhammad, 626, Islam begins in Medina. Mosque at the edge of the world where it says he jumped into heaven. History of Islam, we talked about all that over there. But something I didn't realize is that Muslims actually venerate King David. They actually think highly of King David. I didn't realize that. I knew that Abraham, of course, and from Abraham it goes Ishmael in this way. I didn't really find out why. One of my major assumptions can probably be the fact that David was a warrior king, being one of the things, and they, at least if anything, appreciated that part about him. The other thing that was kind of odd is our Israeli guide and Mark, our English guide, they were up to midnight or 1 o'clock that night before because there was talk that the temple, we might not be able to get the Temple Mount that day based on some other things going on up there and all this stuff. And at the last minute, basically they said, yes, you can come up here today. Because they shut some stuff down for religious ceremonies and stuff like that. And we were in Jerusalem during the high holy days for Islam. So just think, we're already there in a place that has all this stuff going on, but it was cranked up a couple of notches because they're all going to these worship services and stuff. Until the late 1990s, you could actually enter the Dome of the Rock, which is the Golden Dome. But in the 1990s, they shut it down. You have to be Muslim to go inside there. So you might be thinking, well, what's in there anyway? It's not a mosque. Anybody know what's inside or under there besides you, Miss Carol, because you've been there? Anybody know what's underneath the Golden Dome? What it's covering?
Don't they consider it to be the rock that Abraham took Isaac to?
You're almost right. The rock. So Israel, the temple area is built on top of Mount Moriah. Mount Zion is another mountain right there too, but Mount Moriah is where Abraham took Isaac to sacrifice him. We just mentioned it this morning in the sermon, right? Muslims say that Abraham took Ishmael to sacrifice him there, not Isaac. And so that's what's under there is an uncovered part of the mountain. You can go online and find pictures of it because, like I said, it was there. I should have threw one up here, even though we didn't see it. Until the 1990s, everybody could go in there. But that's the rock. Now, the Jews call it the rock of creation, the rock of covenant, the rock of promise. There's all these names for this rock, and we can imagine why it would be called that. There's actually another place on the temple grounds, one other place. That temple ground area covers the whole top of that mountain. But there's one other spot where the rock is visible, and I think that's in our slides tonight. But it just looks like a flat rock. Anyway. All those are tombs. You hear what he said? When we go in the Temple Mount area, we couldn't carry a Bible. You weren't supposed to bring any other kind of books or any of that kind of stuff. Now, all of that can make you feel a little bit antsy about going up there at all. But then they tell you, but the authorities, even though it's kind of operated by Muslims, the authorities there are Jewish. The only people up there that can carry weapons are the Jewish police and Jewish military. So you've got this dichotomy of the Muslims kind of running the place, but they're not the ones that have the authority to bring about justice because the Jewish police and the Jewish military, Israeli military, are the ones carrying weapons up there. Yeah, Miss Bonnie.
Are those above ground crypts or are they?
Yeah. So they would be. So what they would do, the bodies would be put in there, family-owned tomb or so. A year later, and we'll get to this, I don't think we'll get to it tonight, but a year later, ossuaries, bone boxes. They would go gather the bones, they put them in these ossuaries, these bone boxes. Yeah, they would only be in there for a year usually. then they would take out and put them in these ossuaries.
Are they contemporary burials or just all old ones in this company?
We didn't go look at any date stamps on them. I think there were some that were more contemporary, but most of them are old.
So we could run out of room or something.
Yeah, most of them were older. The other thing, I'll wait till we get to 2 weeks from now. There's something else interesting. If you've ever seen any of these up close, there's little stones or rocks on top of them. I'll talk about that in 2 weeks. This is us kind of coming in the back door. We always went in the back door. Our guides always want to take us a different route because everybody sees this route. They want to take us this route. And they also want us to have this awe factor. When we come around the corner and there is whatever this thing is we're going to see. So we're kind of coming in the back door here, but you're going to see in just a minute, there's a lot of people going in the back door besides just us. It's 2 Jewish boys I saw. You notice they've got their hair right here beside this growing out long. But they got Doc Martens on too. This is the line. The gate's way up there to go in. This is the line we're standing on. But it moved faster than what you thought it would. It really did. When we come around the corner and I saw that line, I thought, we're going to waste 2 hours right here in this line. But we didn't. It was pretty quick. See that looks gray or pewter colored dome over there? That's the mosque on the temple grounds. It actually has a silver dome, but weathering of it over the years has made it look kind of tarnished. But that is actually the mosque where the Muslims up there will go to worship at.
Is that Al-Aqsa?
Yes.
The whole area?
Yeah. But there's something else interesting about that. I'll talk about when we get up there. I'll talk about something else because it wasn't built as a mosque. It was actually a church. We'll get to that in just a second. A little bit better picture of it. You can see the little spires on top of it if you look close that you see bigger in certain other areas in the city and other places that I've shown you. This is just us standing in line. You notice the women's entrance, but that's the entrance we all went through. So this is before you go in. You actually make it through security, then this is a little area you stop off at as you're going in further. And Dan's kind of talking to us about the temple itself, the original temple. Kind of laying out what it would have looked like. This is our first view of the Western Wall. So as we kind of come in the gate, we came in, there's a construction catwalk area that goes up over here to the right. And so we followed it. We didn't know we were about to be right there in front of the Western Wall. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Western Wall in just a moment with some of the other pictures of why it's important. But we go up there and we're like, oh, there's the wall right there. We didn't, and you see that little partitioned off area right there. On this side, on the right hand side of it, that's where the women go to worship at the wall. They separate the men and the women right there. That was just the first glimpse of the wall. It just does something to you. I mean, I know it's traditional Jewish type worship, but we'll talk about that some more as we keep going. Again, there's another picture of the. This is kind of the outside wall right there of the mosque. Some of the temple grounds, some of the other groups that are meeting together there. This picture right here might bring back some nightmares for Malia just a bit. I'm not going into all the detail. There's the dome. This is us standing outside the wall of the mosque, so I guess now's a good time to talk through that a little bit. So let me look back through my notes and make sure I get this straight. This is the third holiest place in Islam, in their tradition, but the building was actually built by the Crusaders, so Christians. You know that by the way the stones are cut. As much as even history, we know the history, but even the way the stones are cut tell us that it was a Crusader-built building because all these folks had unique ways of the way they built things. There was a king there, made it his palace, King Baldwin. The Knights Templar set up base there in the same building. We couldn't go in, it's a mosque. Muslims come and conquer. When they come and conquer, they destroyed basically everything up top that wasn't already destroyed. But they left this building, a church, and just converted it into a mosque. So really, That building is a Christian building that has a mosque inside of it. The purpose of that building was to be a Christian church. The other thing we were told as we go up there, I'm trying to jump between the notes that I kind of scribbled out and what I sent in the email. Of course, we had a dress code up there. We're standing right there. We need to go find a bathroom. And so we asked Dan, is there anywhere up here to go to the bathroom? We asked Mark first, our American guide. He said, I don't know of anywhere up here to go to the bathroom. He said, I really don't. So he said, well, ask Dan. So when Dan stopped talking, we asked Dan, and he said, well, you go back kind of the way we went, you hang a right, there's about 6 doors that are green doors, and all the writing above it's Arabic, and you go down this hallway, and there's where the bathrooms are. So we take off to head over there. I took Malia over that way because I didn't want her walking over there by herself. And go down in this hallway, and you walk in, and you go in, and the men's bathroom's there pretty quickly. And there's nothing in there but Muslim folks. The women's bathroom was like down this hallway and around a corner and just completely out of sight and hidden. Like, there's no toilet seats in the bathrooms in the Islam. They don't have toilet seats. Muslims don't have toilet seats. So I get done, I come out, and I'm standing at these steps waiting on Malia, and it's like 10, 15 minutes, and I'm like, I can't really go back there, but then again, there's nothing but, I texted her, she said, I'm on my way out. So we come out, and I'm like, all right, I've got to try to navigate and find our way back to the group, because it's just her and I. So we get over there, and there's a corner that you're going to see in just a moment, which is the corner where Satan would have, it's the southwest corner, so it shows you where Satan would have tempted Jesus to throw himself down. They're leaving that area as we're coming up. My group is. I'm like, huh. So I make sure she's safely with the group, and she goes off with them, and I'm like, I'm not missing out on going over here. So I'll go over there. Then it takes me about 15 or 20 minutes to find everybody after, because it's a huge sprawling area up there. But anyway, it was quite an adventure just to go to the bathroom up there, is the point I'm trying to make. This is actually while I'm waiting on my bride in the bathroom, I think, because you're everywhere around there, you're close to the dome. This is that corner I was talking about. Satan took Jesus, said throw yourself down. That's kind of looking down in the Kidron Valley. Now, all the windows, porticos are very small, so it's kind of hard to get a good picture. Plus, he would be at the top of the temple. This is just the foundation wall. He'd have been much higher than where that is looking out at. Actually, I forgot to put the group picture up there. I didn't make it to the group picture because when I found them, they were taking a big group picture, and I was nowhere to be found. I had to go wander off and see what I just missed. I'll talk about those arches in a moment, too. That's not a Jewish thing there with those arches. There's a little bit of thought process of Muslims of what those arches symbolize and what they will in the future. Something else, as you're looking at this big area, this is the Golden Gate. The interesting thing about a couple of gates around the temple grounds, because the gates to come into the city are all around the foundation area, which is what you see what's left. A huge amount of them have been blocked off, have been rocked in. And it's not just to keep people, plural, out. There's also a thought within the Muslim culture of it keeping Jesus out, the Messiah out when he comes back. So even though they'll deny the Messiah, just in case it's true, we're going to block off these gates so he can't come in where the Bible says he's going to come in through. Of course, we know that'd be no problem for him. He walk through it. He'd just make it move open. He could open those stones up, right? I mean, but anyway, I just thought it was interesting that the Muslims blocked them in. Dan told us that, let's see here, when we left that mosque area and we went to that section, Dan was telling us, so the drop there, again, if you don't remember it scripturally, 450 feet would have been the drop. Josephus said that Satan told Jesus to throw himself down from 450-foot drop to the Kidron Valley. Matthew 4, 5 through 7, if you want to kind of read that again. So as Dan's talking about the temple area here in the inner courts and the outer courts, he said that it could have held 140,000 plus people in that temple ground area. 140,000 plus people.
One thing our guide told us about the gates also, about the Muslims walling them up, is the eastern gate, they started a cemetery in front of the eastern gate, because a rabbi would never go through a cemetery. He would be unclean, and therefore he couldn't go to the temple. Even if he could get through the stone wall,
Right.
he wouldn't go through the cemetery.
Yeah, I didn't hear that, but it kind of makes sense in their thought process for
That
sure.
would be nothing for Jesus.
Now, this is the first time of us actually walking up on top where the dome is. You see that little replica of it down there lower. They talked about that, and historians they're a little bit baffled by it. And one, it looks like it's just a direct representation in some ways, but then it's actually not either if you look at it more closely. And actually it has one or two more walls than the other one does. There's a little confusion on what that was originally built for to begin with. They haven't quite figured that out. Something else of note I put in my notes here, I just noticed 26 soccer fields would fit in the temple ground area. That this whole big area, 26 full-size soccer fields would fit in that. It'd been better if they'd converted that to football fields in my mind, but soccer field's bigger than a football field. So when the Muslims did come and eventually take the region, I made a note here that Dan had told us that they actually took it pretty easily because everyone else had been fighting for so long. They were exhausted and worn out, and it was pretty easy for them to take the city, take Jerusalem. Talked about the Mamelukes. They were Muslim masons, and we're going to see some of their work in a minute when we look at the Cotton Gate. So a lot of, when we get to Genesis 22 on Wednesday nights, a lot of the stuff you can't see, but it happened in this area when we get to Genesis 22, which we're just now at 12, so I don't know, the Lord might come back before we get to 22. I was there. There's my proof again. I was there. This little area right here, I told you earlier, there's one other spot where you can actually touch the mountain again. It's inside of this area right here. Dan, our Israeli guy, kind of even made a joke, and he said, this is the mountain where Abraham offered up Isaac. The rock of creation was here. The rock of covenant was here. All this was here. He said, most Jews say that we're not supposed to touch this or stand on it or whatever. Dan's just stepped right over in it, steps on it. He didn't care. He's like, he said, this man's tradition. He said, it's man's tradition. He's very anti-Pharisaical. He was very anti-Pharisaical. He also eats pork too, by the way. So these arches, what the Muslims believe these arches are for, and they're all over the temple grounds area. They say that when Muhammad comes back, scales are going to drop between each of these arches, and the souls of all the dead will be weighed on those scales to see if they can enter into paradise or not. That's what they say about those arches. There's the area. There's the mountain. That's Mount Moriah right there. And that's the only, besides underneath the temple, the Dome of the Rock, that's the only other place you can see the mountaintop anymore. Like I said, Dan just hopped right on over in there. He wasn't worried. It didn't bother him at all. He said, that's man-made tradition that we can't touch this. It kind of looks like an extension of the rock around, but you can tell there's not the grooves in it. There's cracks, but not the grooves in it from different stones. You can't see it here. You can see there's writings, inscriptions from the Quran that go all the way around the top of this place also. Malia was there too. There's proof that she was there. Didn't leave her on the bus or back in the hotel. Y'all just stop me anytime. some of our folks. They gave us some time to just kind of wander around several places we were at, and this is one of those places.
Is that area generally open? I mean, you hear about times in the news, not warring, but fighting, terrorism related to.
Yeah, well, you might remember whenever I said when we started off that they thought we wouldn't be able to make it up there at all that day because of the holy day and they'd have stuff shut down. But my understanding was for the most part, it's pretty open. You can go and come and go. I mean, they let us just go wandering off.
Jews and Christians
And Muslims. Yep. But actually, I didn't see many Jews up there. It was mostly Christian tour groups, and there were not even a ton of Muslims up there when we were up there. In this area, now when you get back down in the city, there is. But up there actually on the temple grounds, as I shared with a friend of mine who was Jewish who went over there several years ago, they're not as devout in their faith, I think, as we think. They're very westernized. They're very, like, to use language from when we talked about Galilee, they're very Hellenized. There's a Hellenization, that whole mindset is permeating that area too. Even though they're right there in the sight of all these places. But yeah, you can see there's not a ton of people up there, and there's so much space. I mean, 26 soccer fields, you can spread out pretty good too. That look over.
What was the dress code for women?
Skirts down to below your knees or pants, right, Malia?
Leg to cover.
No, it was supposed to be,
To your ankles?
yes.
Okay.
Some women didn't do that.
Yeah, but some women got told a couple times your skirt's too short too. Whenever the last day, yeah, the one lady.
It was her shoulders.
That was right. Her shoulders, your shoulders couldn't be exposed either. Women's shoulders couldn't be exposed. In certain places, and they tried to let you know the day before. Malia kept a little skirt. She could just you get a skirt with just like an elastic band or something. You can just pull it on over pants or over your shorts. That's what she did. She just kept that in her bag. And if we were going somewhere, she had shorts on, she could just slide that right on. Which I think is probably the smartest thing to do. It's so hot over there. You don't want to wear pants if you don't have to. Gate of the Cotton Merchants. That's when I told you that the Muslims put in. You see the green doors right there. I didn't realize that picture was there. There's like 6 or 7 of those for us to find a bathroom earlier for her, and it's all in Arabic over the top of those doors. And it was down this hallway too. Similar to the hallway you see right there. I told somebody, I was telling some of y'all, maybe I was talking about it yesterday, maybe, about the candy. You know, I told y'all how they had sweets at every meal. Watch what you're about to see when we go down to this cotton gate, they call it. Some vendors have stuff set up here. Just candy after candy after candy. I was surprised by that. Then on the other side, you've got little trinkets and stuff that people have made. There's candy everywhere. We got more candy than those candy stores at the mall. Now, when you're in those little areas like that, back home, you'd have a lot of people pressuring you to buy something. We didn't have a lot of that there, but when we left, some other places we went to, they were coming up to you as you're getting on and off the bus trying to sell you stuff. There's a slow motion picture of it. I mean, it looks like candy you see at the candy store at the mall. That's what it looks like. More like solid sweets like fudge type stuff and things like that. Little alleyway that we took out of there. Looks like a Randy little scooter there on the.
Israeli.
Yes. Yep. IDF. Israeli Defense Force. You know you're on the Jewish side of town when you see the flags, the Star of David on them. This is a pretty neat place right here. No, that's not the place I'm thinking about. That's a little restaurant. There's a place you're about to see. It's a coffee shop right here. Between the arches, coffee shop. Random Wildcat. There's the coffee shop. Kind of tucked away in this corner in this little hall, in this kind of byway through there is this pretty neat looking little coffee shop. This was, well, I'll just let y'all see it. I'm not even going to say anything. It just stops you in your tracks. It did me. Walk around that corner, there's the Western Wall. I'll say a couple things about it in just a second. So, the Western Wall, 6 Days War. So this is just what we see above ground. It goes down quite a ways too, foundationally. It's foundation wall. The reason this is so important to the Jewish tradition and faith is that is as close, the Holy of Holies in the temple itself, where the Holy of Holies was, where the Ark of the Covenant was, where that area was right up against the Western Wall. So right on the other side of the Western Wall is where that would have been at. That's why that place is so highly venerated. Additionally, they think when the temple was destroyed that the Spirit of Yahweh God is residing in that wall. You can see why they feel it's so important to them. The 6 Day Wars, there's a famous picture, I think it was in Life magazine, when the 6 Days War in Israel got all this back. There's a picture of a soldier with his hand on the wall with tears streaming down his face that he's actually able to go and worship right there again. This place is extremely important. There's a place, you'll see in a minute when we went down in the foundation, actually, where they've got a carved out area where women will stand there and sit there and pray. They said the Holy of Holies was directly on the other side of that wall. Like, you're not above ground from where it is down, or you're not below ground. It was like right on the other side of that wall is where the Holy of Holies. There was a lady there praying. I know Miss Carol's told me there was somebody there praying when she went there too. We went by and came back, and she was still there. I don't know how long she was there. It wasn't a long time between them, though. When we went to pray there at the Western Wall, you have to have your head covered. So there's an area there's some of our guys there that have the little kippah that you can pick up. I've got one. I'll try to bring it. I meant to bring the stuff again. I've got a big map. Some other things I brought the first night. I'll bring them back in 2 weeks. But you can stop and get one. I had a hat on, so I didn't have to get one, but I got one anyway and put it in my pocket to bring home with me. You see a couple of our guys that didn't have hats, they put one on. My prayer is in that nook right there on the wall. So you go over to the side, there's a guy there with paper and pen that you can write your prayer down. Some people have their own, as you can see, but I shared with some of y'all already. The prayers that are put into these walls, then you put your hands on the wall, your head on the wall, whatever. The prayers that are put in these walls are not thrown away, ever. Twice a year, the rabbis go and pull every single prayer out of the wall. They put them in a box. They go to the Mount of Olives. They pray over the box and all the prayers that have been offered up, and they bury the box in the ground on the Mount of Olives. No prayer that's offered up right there and written down is ever destroyed or lost or anything. That's how they handle those prayers. And then I was near the corner where the women were praying at, so I didn't even see what I was taking a picture of. I just wanted to take a picture of the ladies over there too, because I couldn't get over there to see them or anything. So this is the ladies praying. That's why you see heads on wall, hands on wall. I mean, it's emotional experience, even for a Christian, to be standing right there at that place. Now, you may have not been in here yet, Marty. There's a picture from when we first got in the city. We kind of took a catwalk and walk over a construction wall. And when you look down, there's the big area that we usually see in pictures that you saw a minute ago. That's where the men go to. Then there's a partition wall, like a thrown up type wall, where the women pray on the other side. So I got close enough when I went to pray. I got close enough to that wall. It was only like 6 foot tall, so I did this number to take a picture over there. And you can actually see a couple of our ladies from our group in that picture right there. Not my bride, but you can see some other
I was
ladies.
waiting in line to get a piece of paper.
Okay. Well, then there are some Jewish men there that are sitting there and in deep prayer and writing their thoughts out and that kind of thing. Then they'll get up and go to the wall, and then they'll come back and sit back down at the table. There's these little arches off to the side, and you can go in there, and these are largely rabbinical students that are it's right off the edge of the western wall, this little arch that you can go into. And only men could go in there, too.
And I don't really know what it's called, but when we were there, I guess, new recruits for the Israeli army, they come to the wall and they have a service at the wall. We got to watch that. They come to the wall, they have a service at the wall, they have rabbis there, they pray, they put their hands on the wall, they pray over each soldier, each new recruit. I'm not sure what it's called, but.
It sounds like the swearing-in ceremony that us that served in the American military, you do a swearing-in ceremony. It sounds similar to that, but with the religious connotation of being.
Right.
I shared, I know 2 weeks ago, and they at the end of their boot camp, they go to Masada, that mountain fortress that we saw in the first time, and that's where they commit themselves to service to their country, to God and country. The patriotism there is. Go to the deepest, most patriotic part of the South you can think of. It's those folks are different. Everybody serves in the military. You stay in the reserves till you're 45 years old. You don't go out anywhere else fighting. You stay there and you defend your country. Men and women. It builds. Plus, most of them, since Israel was reformed again in the late 40s, they're only a generation or two removed from being able to come back to their homeland. Their fathers or grandfathers are telling them about that. And most of them fought, and some of that generation, just one or two back, fought in the 6 Day Wars in the late 60s. And then in 1973, when the Arabs, and they're fighting every day. They love their country. They're not all religious Jews, but they love that country. Marty, earlier, we went across this little catwalk thing right here. Oh. Right there. And then you see that where those little umbrellas are? Yeah. There's a wall right below that. The women are on the right side. This is a little armband we got. You can see how dark I am. That's why a lot of the Jewish people try to speak Hebrew to me, because they thought I was a Jew. But like I told you, I found out when I was in my 20s that I do have Jewish blood in me, so maybe that's part of it. We're going into this tour here. We're going down. And we're kind of on the other side of the foundational walls. Here's what I was telling you about earlier. That's a diagram of Mount Moriah and Mount Zion. You see there's a little hump right there. So Zion's on that side and Moriah's on that side. In the background there's a video playing that shows you the temple, what it would have looked like, and kind of it's superimposed over the top of this model down here below. So that's what's going on here. So Dan, there's a model of the temple, or the foundation walls. You take it and set it over the top of the mountain. And that's how it's sitting there right now. That's how it's sitting over the top of those mountains, the foundation. That's the temple structure. That's how big the temple was. Now you can just tell from that it stretches from one side to the other, where Dome of the Rock is not quite that big. But watch this. I need to point this out too. You see that little walkway going up there on the video? How it kind of walks into the temple. You don't have to go down where all the commoners are. That went directly into the place where the Sadducees lived at. So the Sadducees could go to the temple and worship, go do their business. Most of the Sanhedrin was Sadducees. They never had to go down there and walk through the common area at all. They had their own walkway, their own private entrance into the temple area. To quote Claire, they were bougie, whatever that's supposed to mean. I saw some of her homework the other night where she's looking at some stuff, and the description of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, it said something that says they were bougie. I thought, you don't put that on your test. I don't think that's going to fly well. But anyway, watch this picture. There's a scale model of the Temple Mount that we know now with the Golden Dome compared to how big the temple itself was. The Temple Mount stands out. Imagine the temple, it's about 4 times that size. You come into Jerusalem and you see this gleaming limestone, gold encrusted temple. It's pretty impressive to see that, but it's nothing compared to what the temple would have looked like. That was pretty eye opening to me. I had no idea how big the temple was until he put that up there. This video was kind of moving animatronics. It actually goes all the way up to its destruction too, so it's pretty neat. These are just some of the arches that have been there for several thousand years around the foundation. I don't know what that says. I don't have any clue. Now this is about to be interesting. This is the foundation. See, people were putting prayers in there too. You know it's the western wall because you still see prayers tucked in even on the inside. You can see some there. These are foundation stones a lot further down than where we were just at. This stone right there about shoulder level with Dan is about 40 feet long. And it's one stone. I thought I put the video in there. Yeah. We'll back up. So he has one of the ladies go to one end, one of the young ladies go to the other end, and I panned. It's pretty fast, so bear with me. But I panned from one of them to the other one. It's like 45 feet long. All the way there. They estimate, I need to find the exact number on this because this will blow you away. They estimate that stone right there weighs 620 tons. So that's 620 times 2,000 pounds. They don't know how they got it there. They have no idea.
A lot of dead slaves.
A lot of dead slaves, a lot of carving something pretty close to where Dan, was it Dan or Mark? One of those guys said they last group they took, a couple of the guys on the trip were engineers from New York, and they build skyscrapers, build all this stuff. And they said, we don't have anything on the face of the earth today that could pick up that stone and move it. There's no piece of equipment today that can pick up something that big and move it. He said, and this was the foundation walls of the original structure.
Some of this was not destroyed by the Romans. These are Solomon constructions.
Yeah, I mean they couldn't budget 620. Even up, we're going to see a picture maybe today, maybe tonight. There's a picture that shows some of the stuff that they did push over. But the closer you get to the bottom, the bigger and heavier these stones would get. They couldn't move them if they wanted to. They took down everything they could. I mean, they tore down the religious structures for sure, but also kind of similar to the way that Muslims did, right? They didn't tear down this one building because it was something they could use. The Romans could use a lot of that temple ground.
Some of that stuff's been there 3,000 years.
Mm-hmm. This is the site that Miss Carol was talking about. I didn't feel right taking a picture of the lady praying right there, but right on the other side of this wall is where they say the Holy of Holies was. There's a little place carved out opposite of this where you can sit there, and there was a lady there praying, facing the wall as she's praying. This is a little synagogue down inside of that area. I mean, it's pretty ornate, pretty beautiful, actually. I mean, look at that
You can
carving.
stop and think that the Ark of the Covenant was possibly
Right behind that wall.
on the other side of that wall.
Yep.
Ark of the Covenant.
Yep.
I mean,
Probably was, because they agree.
yeah.
There's not a lot of scholarly debate on it. They agree that's where it would have been at. Back out to the western wall. There's the Israeli police. I mean, their headquarters is right there on the temple grounds, right outside the western wall area. Everybody wants to have their picture taken with the pretty Israeli army ladies. Yeah, they're very well trained. And those guns they've got slung around them aren't just there for decoration. They know how to use them.
Guns are real, and they all have them on.
Yeah, they know how to use them.
Beautiful, and they
But you notice, just like young ladies back here and young men and older men too, look what they got in their hands, got their phones out. When we were at the Jordan River, they were up there on their phones the whole time too. Now we left there and we're going to the Shepherd's Fields, right kind of where Bethlehem is. There's an ancient Byzantine church and monastery right there on these grounds. This is some of the ancient ruins from the Byzantine era and the monasteries. This is Shepherd's Fields. Shepherd's Fields. Now this is Bethlehem. This is right on the edge of Bethlehem. All the sacrificial lambs, sacrificial animals, the Sadducees kind of come from that area originally. But this is where they would have been kept at and raised at, the sacrificial lambs. And this is where Jesus was born, was right here in this area. The ultimate sacrificial lamb, the true sacrificial lamb. Mark gives us a study here. And then we go down into the kind of area where Jesus would have actually been born in. He was not, we all have our nativity ideas in our head through tradition, if nothing else. They would have sheltered in a cave. He'd have been put in one of those stone feeding troughs that we showed you back when we were at Megiddo. This is the environment, think of, that Jesus would have been brought into the world in. Something like that. There probably been animals around. I always go back and forth on that when we did the nativity talk about what animals were there. Well, we don't know if there were any animals there. Well, we know there were because of the feeding troughs and everything else, but we can't put up a nativity with camels and lambs, all this kind of stuff, because we don't know what was there. Probably lambs, actually. Sheep. That's what he's explaining. This is the environment, this is the atmosphere, this is the type of place.
The lighting you got there, just everybody's cell phone?
Yeah. And flashlights. They give you a little flashlight. I had a headlamp, like a deer hunting. I take deer hunting, so I kept with me. One of the ladies asked me, what made you think to bring a headlamp? I said, they said we needed flashlights. If I need a flashlight, I'm going to put something on my head so I have both my hands free. But I think that was one of the California people. Where I'm from, men keep a headlamp around. It's not visible enough, audible enough to hear what he's saying there. But that's an example of how dark it would be when there's no light, when I panned around. You're in a cave down, so you know how dark it's going to be. I'm going to give you one of these Bible covers Mark has if I ever go lead a group over there. It's just like just thin leather and has a strap you just wrap around it. It's pretty neat to be able to use like that. This is a picture of the fields, Shepherd's Fields. Now here, when we were in Bethlehem is in Islamic hands right now. It's Muslims that are populate most of Bethlehem. But when we get off the bus in Bethlehem, I don't know if it was like that when y'all went there, Miss Carol, if y'all went there or not. Did y'all go to? When you get off there, that's when you've got the guys that have their handmade bookmarks and all this stuff they're trying to sell you. As soon as you get off the bus, they like just walk past them, smile, don't try not to make that eye contact, smile, and keep walking. Sometimes they got little kids. Sometimes it's usually not 20-year-olds. Sometimes it's 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old men. But that's where they'll come at you right there. Square bucks. A play off of Starbucks, so square bucks. This was lunch that Malia didn't care a whole lot for, but I actually liked it. It's a communal meal like Jews would eat, a family meal. They called it a bagel. No, they didn't call it a bagel. They called it something else, but it looks like a bagel that's been stretched out, about that big, about 18 inches long. It reminded me of like the soft pretzels that you might get at the mall or at the fair or something like that. That's what it was like to me.
It doesn't have flavor.
Well, that's why you got all these bowls. So you've got hummus with olive oil, You've got goat cheese with chocolate, I think. Then you've got goat cheese, you've got chocolate, and you've got just regular hummus. And you share all these bowls, and you take this thing and you just break pieces of it apart and you dip it in there and eat it. Just make sure nobody's double dipping, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, everybody, it didn't at our table. I was watching. There's a picture that shows, you can kind of see in the background how big one is. Back there, you can see kind of how long it is compared to that Coke can. And there's just the olive oil there. Hummus with olive oil. See, everybody's got a whole lot left of theirs. Y'all saw how big a piece I had left a while ago? It was like that long. Everybody else has got like 3/4 of theirs left. I ate that thing like I was not going to get another meal. But then I was full. Like, everybody's trying to hand me what they had left over, and I said, I can't eat anymore. And it was just enough to get me to dinner. I mean, it completely filled me up. And if you ask me, I'm usually the guy of, I need meat at like every meal. I feel like I need that in my head. I need meat at every meal. That's all we had was that, and it would definitely kept me going until dinner time. This is the Christian bookstore. It's in Bethlehem. This family is owned and operated by a Christian family. And so all this stuff you see, this wood is made out of olive wood. Some of it is very, very, very expensive. Some of it's not. I mean, it depends on the aging process of the wood. If it's a big piece carved from one piece, the craftsmanship that goes into it makes it more expensive. They had a lot of jewelry over here too. This one lady was trying her best to get me to buy Malia some jewelry, and I said, I'm not buying that lady any jewelry. Something come up about it being our anniversary just a couple of days before. Oh, you definitely need to buy it. No, I'll let her come over here with me. She doesn't need anything else.
You sound so sweet.
I'm just joking.
Were any of the books in English?
Now, around the corner there, behind the cash register, there were some books, and some of those were in English. They had them in several different languages. Mostly what I noticed was English, Spanish, of course, the native tongues over there, and Korean. Because there's a ton of South Korean believers now. And there was a couple of groups of believers we ran into that I'm pretty sure were South Koreans. And the gospel's exploded in South Korea. Here's some of the pieces that you see. I took a closer picture of some of them. This piece down here, like the boat out over the sea, that's one piece of olive wood, carved out of one piece of olive wood. This is what I fell in love with. It's like $3,000 for that thing. Carved out of like a stump of olive wood, a chess set that looks somewhat like the temple grounds too around it. It was just amazing. Yeah, they can ship stuff. They've actually got a website. You can order stuff directly from the store over there, and they'll ship it to you too. It's called Johnny's. My cousin Anita that was following along the blog, I sent her the itinerary of everywhere we were going. She's reading through it. She texts me back. She said, I can't help but laugh when I see all these names of all these places that you know from Scripture or Hebrew names or whatever. Then right in the middle of all that, it says Johnny's. I said, that's a souvenir shop in Israel, but it was kind of funny. Now you might think, why in the world did you take a picture of this? See this trash on the side of the road? You don't see that when you're in the Hebrew area. You're in the Islamic area, it looked like that. It's the rundown area, the Palestinian areas, when you go through the Palestinian areas in the West Bank, you see the same kind of thing. Trash, litter, doesn't care anything about anything, but the Jews, like I said, they love their country, so that overlaps in a whole lot of other things culturally too for them.
Looks like Hickman County back roads.
Yeah, I thought it looked like somewhere down past Skyview Drive there for a minute.
They don't have guardrails.
No, that's true. No guardrails. This Herodium. This is Herodium. Herod was a lot of things, but one of the things that he was really good at is building. He built some magnificent structures, or had them built. You see how this peak right here is kind of cut down? Then you got the big one behind it. He actually, that one in the background is actually man-made, where he had this mountaintop cut off and moved it to the other mountain to build his palace up there. Herod for you.
That's how they move a 2,000 pound
But they did this piece at a time. You can't move that stone like that, not in pieces.
You can see it literally cuts down to bring tons of material on the.
As Dan explaining.
And when you say, so you're looking at a man-made mountain, even on Herod scale, it's unbelievable. And after many, many years of excavation done by Professor Evan Benson from Hebrew, a teacher, died he actually died here at the site. Professor Benson,
I don't know if y'all caught what all Dan's saying there, but I've told y'all before he was a maximalist, so he went to Hebrew University. His professor, his mentor, was the one that uncovered so much at Herodium, and he said he actually died in that place. It's a few years prior to that. So it holds a special place for Dan when we went to Herodium for sure. And it's impressive from there, but when you look at the things we're going to see, I'm going to show you in just a minute. This is what it would have looked like. This is one side of it. So you see his amphitheater, you see the things down at the bottom, little temple area, the structure at the very top. All this would have been down below with these pools and this island type thing that he could go sit on and nobody could get to him. That little island right there, that's what this is a pool area with that little gazebo looking thing in the center of it. His own little private island and his own little private fortress on top of his own little private mountain that he made. This was the inside of the area, the structure. You couldn't even see from outside. And guess what? When you're in Israel, you don't see a hill or a mountain that you don't go try to climb. So we're about to climb this thing. Melita, you didn't climb that one either. This is steps, but I'm telling you, it was almost as hard as parts of Arbel because you're going to see the steps in a minute. They're like straight up.
What's the round rocks behind you in that last picture?
I don't remember what that sign even said right there, Marty. I think it was just some remnants of stuff they found after the earthquake that I've talked about a couple times over there. Yeah. It looks like catapult stones. That's probably what it was. We were kind of on our own here, and I was about to have to take a hike, so I wasn't stopping and looking at every single thing. But yeah, it does look like catapult stones. Now, the interesting thing, there's a lot of interesting things about Herodium, but from Herodium, Herod could have seen Bethlehem, Jerusalem both clearly at any time. So think about that. Where he's at when Jesus comes into the world is there. And he would have been able to see all of this. He didn't know what he was looking for, but all this stuff was taking place right there.
Did the Romans destroy his palace?
No, they didn't. He was in cahoots with them anyway. Actually, they showed this little video of it. He entertained dignitaries from Rome all the time. I mean, Caesarea was built as homage to Rome. Caesar gave him that land to build Caesarea. There's a little video they showed us that talks about him, the second or third guy in charge, second or third highest ranked person in Israel in Rome, came there to visit. He kind of went all out and built more things there to accommodate this guy to impress him as he came in. Part of his amphitheater. And I told you, you don't see a hill or a mountainside that you don't, your guides, especially when you get younger guides like what we had, they want to go climb. Also, though, anytime there's a stopping point as you're climbing, you better stop and get some shade and at least act like you're taking a picture so you can catch a breath, or that's the way I treated them at least. This is kind of the video show they did. This is actually part of the original mosaic that was on the wall 2,000 years ago, that you can see through the plaster. That's kind of when they showed this video and they kind of superimposed it over the top of what was there. Told you all those steps were pretty straight up and down. They were pretty straight up and down.
I'll break handicap accessible, is it?
It's not. It's really not. I mean, now all those areas though, there's opportunity to stay on the bus and take an alternate route for stuff. It's not. I'd say there's a Mount Carmel. There's no way when we got up there. I mean, it was because even the path to get to Mount Carmel to look down to where Elijah would have done what he did. It's rocky and jagged in the path. There's big rocks that are sticking up here and there. There would have been no way. But some of these other places you can get there through alternate means. Just some things that were left over after the earthquake that hit. And just when you think you've got to the top, you got more to climb. Some of the original arches, the work done on the walls on top of the plaster. This is kind of in the structure of the fortress itself and the lookout tower up there. This is the view from the top. When there's no clouds over there, you can see forever. The other thing, I don't know if I shared with y'all or not, something else you don't see over there unless you're near Tel Aviv, you don't see chemtrails in the air from airplanes. You don't see them. The airspace over there is so restricted over Israel. Unless you're going to Ben Gurion and out, and you only come in a certain path in and out of the international airport in Tel Aviv, you do not see planes in the air over there. My understanding would be if you see a plane in the air over there, something bad is about to happen or just happened probably. Guy at work, Dan from work, he went to Israel, and they were at the Dead Sea area, and they heard something coming, and they looked out their windows, and Israeli jets come flying over the Dead Sea, and like right outside their windows, there was something going on, and that's right there on the border. Jordan and Syria is right there, but you don't see planes flying over there. The United States, that sky would have been bluer. There'd be clouds, and you'd see trails from planes in the sky. That sounds like a plane in the distance. That's just the wind. I was there. We're starting down there, different kind of steps. But something I noticed here, see those little pieces of concrete that were added later so they can drive like a side-by-side up there or something, those little diagonal pieces that are put in so you're not bump all the way up. So I guess you could probably tell, you talk about handicap accessible, if they had a golf cart, or a golf cart wouldn't do it, but a side-by-side, something like that could carry somebody up there, coming up that way. This is when we got back that evening, we put our puzzle pieces together. So this is kind of the foyer area of the hotel we stayed in Jerusalem. It was pretty nice, the Dan Hotel in Jerusalem. It's a picture of Herodium. And then Bethlehem down here, and you see the open cave. And it was somebody he knows drew this picture, painted it or something, and turned it into a puzzle. I'm not going to make any comment, I'll just let y'all see it. This is the next morning. That's overlooking the old city. This is from our hotel in Jerusalem. It's our time of devotion, our devotional time to start the day. The Temple Mount again. Done with the rock. I think I took this picture because I shared with y'all last time about those R2D2 looking things, the water heaters on top of the buildings. It's like an apartment complex type building. It's just full of those things on top. Those white things are all water heaters. And the black things are too, on top of them. The Yumborghini sandwich shop. Like I said this morning, they're more clever than me. I believe this day or the next day was the high holy day. It leads up to a day. Maybe the last day we were there. We're standing right here. Let me make sure I get this right. So most of this day we spent in the city of David, which is down the slope a little bit, the ancient city, the ancient of ancient cities. Now King David come and took this place. The Jebusites were there and defeated them and took the city. And you remember I told y'all there's not a ton of historical evidence of King David. Solomon was a builder and left a lot behind. David wasn't a builder. Didn't leave much behind. But we spent the morning in the ancient city, the city of David. And that's kind of what we're doing here. There's something I know I wanted to speak to. The view here, we see the Mount of Olives, Kidron Valley. We'll go to the southern steps this day, Pool of Siloam. The other point that our guides wanted to make for us here, when you think about David and you think about him standing at his palace, what does that bring to mind? Sheba, right? This is where he would have been at. Pretty easy to look down at everybody's rooftops from right there, wouldn't it be? This was like halfway up the hillside, the mountainside. So in the 60s and 70s, massive excavations started in the city of David, and it comes all the way up to now. And there's a lot of artifacts they found, primarily from the sewer below the Pilgrim's Road, because everything winds up in the sewer. That's where they found a lot of things. They found a little golden bell that would have been from the high priest. The high priest had the garments with the little golden bells, the rope with the golden bell, where if he fell out there, God killed him when he's going in the Holy of Holies, they could drag him out. They found a little golden bell. They found coinage. They found some other things that lead back to that period. Kind of explains the layout of what you got going on there. Part of what you saw there, though, was actually the Valley of Gehenna. Gehenna, Jesus alludes to it. Remember what Gehenna was? That was the trash heap. It's where they burned the trash. The fire never went out. He referred to hell. He referred to Gehenna a lot. That they would recognize, and actually there's been times in Israel's history where they would sacrifice babies there in that spot also, in that valley. Just looking back towards the temple area. That's a symbol for David. The stringed instrument. So the city of David, that's a symbol of David. This is kind of a recreation of mosaic floor they found.
This is within Jerusalem.
It is. It's just kind of down the hillside. It's not up near the temple area itself. Which makes sense. David wasn't allowed to build the temple anyway.
This whole area that you're visiting from that hotel in Jerusalem, how big is it relative to something we know about around here?
And we didn't go to the. Yeah, I mean, we didn't go around the perimeter of the city per se. And we went out a little bit to where Herodium was.
You went to Bethlehem.
We went to Bethlehem, which is right there. Bethlehem's right there. It's not. I think in our mind we might think about it being further away from Jerusalem, but it's not. It's right there.
That's what I was trying to.
None of these places were far. You remember, at Herodium, you could see everything. When you're in Jerusalem, I'd say we didn't go any more than 5 miles in any direction driving, and most of the places we went to, we stayed on foot all day long. These are some of those excavations I told you about from the 60s and 70s. This points to David being real. This one piece, because you look at it, and the first thing that comes in your mind, or my mind, most people's mind, is Greece or Rome, right? That's a column from Greece or Rome. But it's not. That's Phoenician architecture. When you go back and you read, when David took Jerusalem, when David took the mountain, whenever the Jebusites were moved out, all these kings in the local areas were trying to pay homage to him because they respected what he had done. They sent Phoenician builders to build his palace. The Bible tells us that. That's the only reason there's any kind of Phoenician architecture there, is because of what we see in Scripture saying, and it's connected directly to King David. That's a manufactured, that's a copy, but the original piece of that column is in the Israeli Museum. I'll show you that in 2 weeks. It's actually on their coinage. It's so important they found that it's on the back of Jewish coins, that column piece they found, because it's tied to nothing or no one else but King David. Stepstone structure, part of a support wall, probably would have been part of his palace. The burnt room would have been part, you see that, it's some stones that are kind of burned. That's part of their coin. It's blurry, I've got it, I'll bring it next time. That's their coin, one of their coins right there. There's that same column on top of that coin. It's 5 shekel piece. This is just traveling through the old city where the city of David would have been, the ancient city. Again, up or down, everywhere you go, up or down. I think the only level place in Israel is the actual Temple Mount itself, and Masada's flat when you get to the top. You got to climb a lot of steps to get anywhere flat. So that's the Valley of Gehenna right there. That's the valley that Jesus referenced when he talked about the fire never going out, where they burn their trash, where babies were burned at certain times. When he referenced hell, that's the place he's referencing. Except when he was in Caesarea Philippi, in that cave that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, he referenced it there because the pagans referenced it there. I was there too. There's the tombs again. Malia was there. This is when we're going down. We're getting ready to go through Hezekiah's tunnels. There's a couple of things to see on the way. This is talking about a British explorer that called the Warren. I forgot his first name, Warren. He's kind of the inspiration for Indiana Jones. This guy Warren, and he's over there. It's him right there. And some of the exploration he was doing to get down into these tunnels and shafts to try to find the original Hezekiah's tunnels, to find the Gihon Springs where it would come in and out, and all these kind of things. He did a lot of this exploring to try to get there. This is us going down to get to the tunnels.
Pretty far, right?
Yeah.
Down.
Yes. They're kind of creative. You see, there's a lamp inside of what looks like a ancient vase. It's kind of carved into the wall. Dan's talking here to us. You read scripture about when Solomon's coronation was, and it talks about the springs and the wells and that kind of thing. It's widely, tradition will tell you that he was coronated in the area we were in, down in here. Solomon would have been coronated down there. Dan jumps up there and he says, I'm really not supposed to be up here. Part of the shaft, Warren shaft. Always happy to be in the cool. What? Every time a picture of her pops up, she says my name. She wants me to hurry up and move the slide. That kind of is a reference right there. 1 Kings 1, 33 through 34, and it talks about where his coronation took place at. It talks about it being in Gihon Springs, where it was carved into the rock. All that kind of stuff is laid out in 1 Kings. Now this, King Hezekiah, the Assyrians had taken the north. and they were on march to the south. They were coming to Jerusalem. Their water, the Gihon Springs, fed from outside the city walls. We've already talked about this when we were back in Megiddo and some other places. That's a tactical problem, right? Because your enemy can shut off your water pretty easily. So there's a tunnel system employed here. They tunnel out to the water so it can come into the city. Then on top of that, they build a structure that covers up the spring on the outside all the way back, so it just looks like an outcropping of a defensive perimeter or something. So this is a little video they showed of, they laid on top, they superimposed it. You can't see it well, so I'll just skip that video. But you can see how it kind of comes down right there. That's representative of it. I started the video too late to capture the good picture. That's what the walls would look like in the ancient city, though. Jerusalem would have been inside those city walls. You'll see that better when I show y'all Israel, the Museum of Israel in 2 weeks. Because there's an awesome model of the city that we stood back and could take a picture of what it would have looked like. So at this point, there's another opportunity to go one of two ways. So everybody that was willing to go through the tunnels, they said it was about a half mile, but I'm telling you, I think it was further than that, could go in the tunnels. And there were times where the water was up to your thighs, and a lot of times it was down at your ankles, but there were times you walked through it for 50 yards where it was up to your thighs. Cold, cold water. Beaver Dam was cold this morning, but this was colder. But there's another option. Lee and some of the other folks went on, but they said y'all walked in water too, right? Didn't you tell me that? Not much.
No, Dan took us.
Oh.
Madonna.
Just you two? It doesn't matter. I just was wondering. Rhonda. So when you get in these tunnels, there's a ton of pictures. So I'm going to flip through some of these pretty quick that I took while I was in there. This is where the headlamp came in handy instead of holding a flashlight. There's a guy, though, he's about 3 in front of me. I really wish he didn't have one. He was one of these big California climb mountain guy all the time. His headlamp had a reflective light on the back, kind of an emergency beacon. And I was like, man, I don't want to see this red light up there glowing in my face the whole time. But he was too far ahead for me to yell at him, and you can't really hear that well down there. There were times in these tunnels where I had to turn like this because I couldn't walk broad-shouldered through it.
Well, that's what I had to do.
Yeah, it was a lot of places in these tunnels. So that's what we're doing. Half-mile walk through Hezekiah's tunnels. You can see the glow from the red light from the guy in front of me right there. I turned my light off just to show you how dark it was. I stayed back, let him get far enough ahead, and that's how, I mean, it's pitch black. All the moanings because how cold the water was. Jeff and his wife's daughter was right behind me, and she was.
Natural clean water,
Spring water. You can see it got a little deeper there. There's a couple places where it drops off a little bit, so everybody get to trust people in front of you to turn around and say, hey, you know, there's a drop off right here. I mean, we're 100 yards in and people are still talking about how cold the water is. When it's that cold, it's hard to get used to it, really. What's that? Yeah, there's a picture I think I've got in here. Yeah, it was chipped out by hand. You can see these marks in the side where they were chiseling. So you can tell if it was a right-handed guy or a left-handed guy. You can see a little bit right there, the grooves from hand tools chiseling that rock out. And doing it quickly because you know Assyria's on the move. That's a good question. I'll get to that in just a second. Because it's not just these guys. There was a team coming from inside from inside the city and a team from outside the city coming to try to meet through solid rock. Their lives were in jeopardy. Assyria was not to be messed with. And you'll see a map in just a second. I'll explain a little bit more in just a second.
that's hard to do today.
I turned my light off a lot when I was walking through just because there was enough light all around me to see. Water dripping from the ceiling too. Stalactite starting to form. That was my hand, proof that I was there. Make sure we know I was there. The guys up front started singing.
It's a fairly recent discovery.
The video doesn't do justice. Those guys up front were the guys that would lead worship in their church, and they started singing. So we're in this hallway. I mean, it just starts flowing through the whole shaft of this singing praise music to God. There's a lot of places here where the roof is like right at your head, but it was kind of hard for me to film and do that at the same time. Just trust me, it got pretty low in spots too. But here, look how high it is. It's 25 feet tall there. So back to Marty's question, or what he was saying. I mean, I was amazed when I saw how high it was right there, because there was times where I had to duck down. Okay, so when they started on the outside, and this is us getting out here. When they started on the outside digging towards where they knew they needed to get to, from the outside looking, they knew they would need to go to. From inside, you're right when you get ready to get out, it dropped down to just about waist level. So that all that cold water that's beneath your feet jumps up and you get out. So they're coming from the outside, this group's coming from the inside. And I'm going to show you a map in a minute. So the guys on the outside, where the ceiling's so high, after they got started, they realized that they were wrong elevation-wise to be able to meet them right. So that's why it's so much taller from the outside piece. They had to come down. How they met each other, historians have been somewhat baffled by this, trying to figure it out. The only thing they can say, God. Half a mile through rock. Now, right, there's a map it'll show you in just a second. Yeah. These are the original stones from the Pilgrim's Road. From the time when Rome came into Jerusalem to raise it to the ground. This map. See right there in kind of the center point, how it does a little zigzag dogleg thing right there? When they got close and they thought they were close. Now through that kind of rock, you heard how it echoed through there, right, whenever we were singing. So there's a little bit of noise that travels a little bit. But when they thought they were close, they started doing this with their tunneling. Knowing that if they did that, they would hopefully hit each other, and they did. You see that jagged on both ends, trying to meet each other. But God's the only thing you can explain the way that they were able to meet and get that done before the Assyrians got there.
How long are you talking about?
I don't remember how long it took them to do that, Lori. I don't know if they know 100% because I don't remember Dan saying it. There's been a manhole to the sewer system right there. It's still there from 2,000 years ago. Older than that, actually. They were trying to recreate what it would have looked like on the Pilgrim's Road. Now, this is us walking the original Pilgrim's Road. Like I said, this is all just stuff they're wanting to do. This is all like models of what they want to do. Now, you see where these green stones are now, these clear stones. Right below the Pilgrim's Road is the sewer system. So when the Romans came into Jerusalem, the people that were holding out went to the sewers to try to get away and try to hide. The Roman soldiers figured out what was going on. They pulled stones up from the road, accessing the sewers, and with their long spears, they were killing Jews in the sewers. They haven't replaced the stones, just kind of to remember what happened. That's why this looks like that right there. Path of the Pilgrims, they call it, Pilgrim's Road. This is the Pool of Siloam. that hasn't been found that long ago either. This is a pretty recent discovery, actually. I don't think, Carol went to the bathroom, but I don't think they had found it when she went 15 years ago. Or they had just found it and you couldn't see it. Miss Carol, Pool of Siloam. Had they found it when you were there, or they had just found it when you were there?
They had just found it, I think. I don't think they.
You couldn't see it though, right? You
Yeah.
didn't. This is the Pool of Siloam right here.
I don't think it was found when we were there.
I don't think it was either. I think it's very, very recent.
No, I don't think so.
But this is it. They've uncovered it. It's right outside where you come out of Hezekiah's tunnels. Again, everywhere there, you put something in the ground, put a shovel in the ground, you're going to find something. So it's leaving, walking up the path. We're about to come to a conclusion here. I don't know what that is. I just thought it was a neat sign, so I took a picture of it. Again, this road we had to go up was straight up also. We're walking up, cars come around, beep, beep. You just get out of the way.
It's a crazy car ride.
That's right. Y'all went like and found an Uber or something.
No, we did not find an Uber.
You can even tell from the video it's pretty vertical walk there. There's a close-up of the water heaters that I was so smitten by for whatever reason. That's a close-up of them. I was thinking one of these videos you could hear the Muslim call to prayer. There's another one, this Gavante parking lot excavation. They don't even really know what they found all there yet. This is a brand new discovery that they're uncovering. In 2 years, Claire and I get to go back. They may have a lot more explanation of what they found right there. They, like that sign said, they know they think it's from the First Temple period though.
When they find something, does the archaeology always take priority? I mean, they don't ever just run over anything.
No. Like I said before, when new construction or whenever you put in a new parking lot over there, they find something, everything shuts down. But they realize, well, they don't realize what they could have just found. This is the sewers. It took us to the sewer. We got the tour of the sewers. This is where there's a close-up of the chisel marks from how they would have carved these tunnels out. This is where the Romans were hiding, the Jews were hiding from Rome in these tunnels. The sewers.
You had to carry the rock out too.
Yeah.
The process. That
Yeah.
was kind of complicated because there wasn't a lot of wiggle room.
They were smaller than us, generally speaking, but still.
Coming and going.
Coming and going, swinging a
And
couple tools.
Wow.
We weren't rubbing the walls as much when we were in the sewers as we were when we were going, through the tunnels and everything else. The drainage channel during the Great Revolt. You know what that is? They're pumping clean air in that place. These are some of the early foundation stones. I'm going to go through this piece pretty quick. I already know what we might have just stop right here. I want to point something out because it was brought up earlier about what was thrown down. This is some of the stones that was thrown down from the top in 70 AD. They just left them there. These are channels that we're in, but there's an interesting thing I'm about to show you. Right here, there's this little groove cut. This has been at the very top corner. And you can't see the sign, but what it's talking about, in Hebrew, it talks about the shofar. This is where the shofar blower would have been at to announce commencement of holy days and to commence The Sabbath, he'd have stood at that place, at that point, where the shofar would have been, and blew the shofar that it was time for Sabbath to start and when it was over with, and when high holy days would come. And they found that stone. It was one of them thrown from the top. That's what that groove, you can see some kind of inscriptions. That's the Hebrew for it. That's what was there. That's where he'd have blown the shofar. That's what. There's another long foundation stone right behind you. See that corner, how it goes all the way to the end? This is right on. What's that? What were you going to say?
I was gonna say, one of our guys had a theory that 2,000 slaves chopped down 4,000 pine trees, and you got this long pine trunk, and they dig out a little bit under those stones, and they start rolling them, and they run ahead, put another one down, run ahead, put another one, run ahead, so, that was his theory on how they moved them.
Interesting.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that happen, but
They
I
had to
guess
go
it
uphill,
could.
that'd be a problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see ancient archaeologists and historians talk about the way they moved stone in Egypt in a similar way.
That was flat. This is
That was
uphill.
flat. Yeah, there's nothing flat over there.
So uphill would be an issue with that theory.
Yeah. This is kind of going around to the corner to the southern steps. I believe this is the last place we visited before lunch, so we'll please do this. The southern steps. Thought this may be in where the sermon at Pentecost was preached. There was room for it. There was room for a lot of big open. Did your guide say something about that, Miss Carol?
Oh, yeah.
That's the thought, that this is where the sermon preached at Pentecost would have taken place. You see, as we get closer to it, you can see how wide and tall these are. And there was actually some flat portico areas built around there too. And there's a ton of mikvahs there, ceremonial baths. I think there was like 2 or 3 dozen of them around that area. I don't remember what that was for. I looked through it and didn't really show me anything. The Hulda Gates is one name for this. The Sheep Gate would have been right around the corner from here. You hear about the southern steps, these are the southern steps. There's a triple gate. There's 3 or 4 gates up there, but there's a triple gate right in the center that we're going to see in just a minute. You can see it as it pans down, I think. No, you won't see it. It's right there. I just zoomed in. There's the Muslim call to prayer you could hear in the distance. That triple gate there is very important. That's one of the mikvahs filled up with some not so clean water. There's Dan standing in front of the triple gate. Hear that? That was the Muslim call to prayer. Or that was actually them praying through the speaker. So we're standing there. Mark's pointing this out. Neil Armstrong, after he walked on the moon, he came back and one of the first things he did was go to Israel. When he went to Jerusalem, he tells the guide, he says, "This has been great. Can you take me to some place that with near absolute certainty you can say Jesus stepped right here?" He took him right there. He said, "This stone covers the entrance of this triple gate. This was a gate Jesus would have came into multiple times. He would have stepped on this stone. I can't tell you his foot was right here, but he would have stepped on this stone." When he did that, Neil Armstrong fell on his face in tears, kissed that stone, and said, "I have never seen anything, nothing has impacted me, or I've seen nothing so beautiful, so great, whatever." And his whole life. That overshadowed anything he did going to space and going to the moon and all that stuff when he was there. So everybody had a chance to kind of go, touch the stone or whatever they wanted to do. Spend some time in reflection and prayer there. That's me touching it. I didn't ask anybody to take it. Thankfully, Devin or Eric, one of those two, took the picture when I went up there because it's kind of hard to take a picture of yourself doing that, and he sent it to me later. I didn't know any because Malia, you were still down there where the shady area was, I think. I'm just glad they had the wherewithal to take my picture because otherwise I wouldn't have any picture of me doing that.
Yeah, what a great picture.
I believe here he's teaching about Pentecost, the day of Pentecost. This is lunch. We're going to end right here. We're on the Mount of Olives, right near the Mount of Olives, this park area, looking back towards Jerusalem. This is our guy that could sing all the time. There was a piano there that had been out in the weather. Of course, it doesn't rain a whole lot, so it's not like it had been sun damaged. He just jumps over and starts playing the piano. The wildcat. Looking back that way is towards the Mount of Olives.
That's the day we had pizza.
We had pizza that day, yeah. And their pizza, a lot different than pizza we eat over here. I mean, there's not pepperoni and ham and bacon and sausage on them, so you take all those off, and I don't really know what they do on pizza anymore. But it was, I don't remember what I was on some of those pizzas. All right, we'll stop there. We'll pick up at the Israel Museum next week. That was lunch on our second day in Israel. Any questions, overarching thoughts? There's so much to see there. I mean, all throughout Israel, but Jerusalem is, I didn't think tonight would take as long as it did, but anyway. I know there's some food next door. I'm going to go ahead and ask the blessing on it so anybody can just go over there and start. Unless there's some instructions, Marty, Lori. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and pray. Father God, we thank you again for this time together, Lord, and the blessing of being able to go to Jerusalem, be able to share it with these that want to hear more about you. God, I ask as we go next door and everybody that wants to stay and eat a bite, Lord, that you would bless this food to nourish for our bodies, that you would watch over us, lead, guide, and protect us, carry us safely back to our personal homes. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.